Hello everyone, welcome to Chasing a Murderer. Today we are on part 110 of Life Beyond the Grave, which is attached to the Vallow and Chad Daybell case. Before we get started, I would like to ask if you guys would love to help us support this channel by liking, subscribing, and you can hit the notification bell if you want notifications whenever we have new uploads. It would be very, very much appreciated. Thank you so much to those that have done this already. It's been tremendously helpful and very appreciated. You guys rock. I do feel honored to have such great people here on this channel. And I have to brag, I think we have the best people on YouTube here. Before we get right into this timeline, I want to remind you guys that we're trying to figure out where Vallow and Chad Daybell is getting a lot of their information, their ideas from. And it's true that it seems that they get some of their ideas from Julie Rowe, Michael Strad, and several others. But is Julie Rowe truly the main source? During this time, we know that Julie was excommunicated. A member called a presidency, and they called the stake presidency that called the presidency, and so on, complaining that Lori was not teaching true doctrine. She was accused of teaching false doctrine, and that they expressed dislike of her podcast, books, and energy work. But Julie Rowe is not alone in doing all this. In fact, nearly everyone attached to preparing the people, they're doing these energy healings or they're teaching them. It's just absolutely insane, the bias going on here. And it seems to be a problem for Julie since Vallow stepped into this group. So the church is asking Julie Rowe, stop doing your energy healings, stop doing your classes, stop doing your sessions, and do not use prayer or casting out spirits before or after these sessions. So while she's in church court, Vallow, Chad Daybell, and their little minions, well, they're doing their own private casting out. So I want to know, is Melanie Gibb telling her little state presidencies about these things? That's an interesting question. And the thing is we can't figure out why, but suddenly the presidency decided to go after Julie now. She's also been accused of doing priestcraft. So what is the traditional LDS definition of priestcraft? Well, it comes from the Book of Mormon. Men or women preaching and setting themselves up for the light to the world. They may get gain or praise of the world, but they seek not the welfare of Zion. But there is a whole doo-doo ton of people making money off of this. Like, for example, preparing the people conferences. AVAL, where Chad Daybell used to be by her side and defending her. He's no longer there. He might be actually one of her problems. It's up to her friend Eric Smith to try to write a rebuttal against some of the things that are being said out there about Julie. And around this time, is this all that Julie will be upset about when it comes to the church and the church leaders? Well, it seems to me that once this starts to happen, Julie realizes this. She realizes all these other people are doing this, yet she's the only one really being sucked in the nose for it. She starts saying that there may be men who are corrupt within the church. And she says, quote, and if these men are corrupt, that the church think that they can get rid of me, well, they're wrong. And when they listen to this, I hope they hear me loud and clear. I'm not going anywhere, end quote. In fact, Julie says it might not be Satan whispering in her ear, but she believes that Satan might be whispering in the leaders' ears. And then we'll hear a few things like crime families cloaked within the LDS hierarchy. Julie claims that in time, these crooked, corrupt individuals within the LDS leadership, they're going to be exposed. Meanwhile, though Vallow is not a fan personally of Julie Rowe any longer, she still continues to follow some of her teachings and some of the things that she has said in her podcasts. But the church has a big fight on their hands because it's no longer just like Julie Rowe or maybe one other that's doing this energy healing. We have heard from Melanie Gibb and Zelima right out of their mouths that they too have been supporters and actual clients of energy healing. And they continue to do so, knowing how the church feels about this. And Charles, mind you now, he's still talking to a few of these stake presidents about his wife and what she's teaching, who she's talking to, and what they're getting into. He's sharing some of the ranking systems and some of the documents that he's able to print out. In fact, a lot of these documents that some of these people are getting their hands on, people like Brandon Boudreaux, the police, they're coming from Charles Vallow. So when is it that Melanie Gibb and David Warwick start to date? Well, it's got to be somewhere in this timeline. We learned that Melanie Gibb's husband is rumored to have filed for divorce around this time. Chad is texting and messaging other women through Facebook and through his phone, talking about a lot of these preparing a people conferences, these new ideas that he and Lori are teaching. We know that he's already made advancements on married women, and Lori Vallow being one of them. Meanwhile, Brandon Boudreaux, his life has been torn apart. He's regretting a lot of his support to his wife against Charles Vallow. And it's around this point that he's kind of cutting himself off from that family and the people that he knows through that family. Melanie Boudreaux continues to dig herself deeper into a hole and becomes basically a prisoner of this cult. What a lot of us can't figure out is her role within this cult. Did she feel forced into this cult, or did she really believe in everything that they were teaching? We know now that Melanie Boudreaux is smart enough probably to figure out, all these threats that Lori makes to other people. And the man that Melanie Boudreaux trusted and loved most in her life, the father of her children, she claims that he is now possessed by a demon. We learned that Aubrey is learning more about these past lives and these multiple probations that Chad is making a list of. He is volunteering names without them even knowing that he's doing this, and giving who they were in a past life. She knows that Chad claims to have been Methuselah. We've covered that in the last podcast, and James the Just. And maybe later on we can go into more details as, to who these people were, because there's still more puzzle to solve in this. And we are learning that Lori's actually telling people that she crushed medication that belonged to JJ and put it in Charles' protein drink. But Lori seemed to be in Texas with Charles with some kind of intention. Could it have been that she tried to cause a car wreck, because she mentions the fact that Charles and JJ might die in a car wreck? This is before she'll say JJ is a zombie. We know because she crushed this medication in his protein drink, this must have been an attempt for him to drink this maybe and then cause the car wreck. We don't know what her intentions were at this time, but it was something not good. Whatever she was trying to accomplish, or she felt like defeated, she's telling Charles, you know what, I want to go back home to Arizona and be closer to my family. Charles Vallow does anything Lori asks, and he will actually reach out to his landlord shortly here and try to make arrangements to rent a house through him for Lori and the two children, JJ and Tylee. Charles, just moving to Texas, decides he's just going to hold on to that house and rent them another house in Arizona. Now, this is where I've also not had a lot of time to update, but according to my old research, Lori actually plans to go back to Texas around June 3rd. She's there for a bit. Chad hangs out with his family one last time before he cuts them off completely. And this is something we know because Heather Daybell shared it with us on True Hidden Crime. So Melanie and her aunt, well, they're kind of lying. They're manipulating people. They're being sneaky and hateful. Had serious accusations, basically accusations / lies against Brandon and Charles. And Melanie Boudreaux seems to mimic Lori almost perfectly. Now, I ran into this podcast on True Hidden Crime. It's titled Lori Vallow Daybell Case, Once Friend of Chad Daybell, Janelle. She actually shares a lot of information that is a little useful to us, but she gives us a glimpse of who Melanie Gibb is around this time, and I wanted to share that. But if you want to catch the rest of it, head over to True Hidden Crime and check it out.
Okay. So, Melanie had always thought of herself as a gatherer. When I first met her, she was very humble, and I could tell she had a testimony of Jesus Christ, and always wanted to bring people to Christ. That was what she had felt. She had invited Sean and I up to Tabiona because they were having an outing up there, and we just stayed the night up there because I had a family reunion up in the Uintas. So we stayed the night there and then went up to the Uintas. But she was really busy, and she always kept herself busy, and David Warwick was there. And he was very impressed. I remember him saying, I guess it was talking about gathering, she's really doing it. She's not just saying it, but she's doing it. And he was really impressed with her. And we pretty much hung out by ourselves. My girls were there. One of her sons were there, so they kind of hung out together. And in the morning, Sean was really somber and very serious, and we were laying in the tent. And he told me, he goes, there's something that's going to happen to Melanie Gibb that's going to be very hard for her to go through. He goes, I don't know what it is, but it's going to be very hard. And I was thinking, I want to tell her. I want to tell her that. I want to warn her, but inside I felt the answer was no. I shouldn't do that.
So she's speaking of her husband, Sean Little Bear, who was also part of Preparing the People, but the outside of this clique that is doing all these strange practices. Janelle says she would kind of feel like she's not in with them, but that's a good thing, Janelle. You don't want to be in with people like this. But even Janelle, like myself, could tell that Melanie Gibb played a big part in gathering. I want to hop back for a second. Remember when I said that Chad Daybell would spend one last time with his family, and it was for his mom's birthday? And while they were there, according to Tammy's sister, Samantha Williams, she gives a testimony of what she believes happened around this time, so I'm going to share it. You can catch the entirety of this testimony at East Idaho News.
Which visits are you referring to?
June or July of 2019, a visit when your sister came and something was off with Chad.
Yeah, that happened in June. They came and stayed with us.
The June of 2019?
Yes, they had come down from Idaho to celebrate Chad's mom's birthday. His parents live in our same town, and they stayed with us for part of that visit.
And then, was there another visit just a month later in July?
Yes, in July, but we didn't know they were in town. They had not written a book, but they had published a book for another author. That there was a movie premiere tied to that book, but I hadn't heard about it. It was for The Fighting Preacher. And they happened to be in town for that. And they just showed up at our door to give me my birthday present.
And that was when Chad would not come in to visit with you?
Correct. He sat in his car.
And that was unusual?
It was very unusual.
And then the next time you saw your sister was in October of 2019?
Correct.
And that was also in Utah?
So we're jumping ahead right there just a little bit. That's okay, because we'll go back to it in more detail later. Now, Samantha will be Chad's enemy simply because he claims that she refuses to read his books. And we can hear in this testimony here that she doesn't seem all that thrilled with Chad's books. And she claims that she did read one.
I moved to Idaho. That it became harder to stay in touch.
Correct.
Did Chad talk to you about his near-death experiences?
Yes, he did.
Did he write books about those?
Yes, he did.
Have you read those books?
Only one of them.
How would you describe his books?
Very spiritual in nature.
Were they well received? Did he make money off of them?
He did make some money off of them, yes. I don't know the exact amount.
And so, when did you first hear Chad talk about his near-death experiences?
I actually don't recall a time for when that happened.
Was it something before his book was published?
I believe he probably brought it up in conversation. We hold a lot of that stuff to be, personal. So when people talk about their spiritual experiences, I don't write that down.
But yet Chad was not keeping his experiences personal. He was writing books and going to conferences.
Correct.
So he was trying to make money off of his, what he'd call a spiritual experience.
That's a complicated answer.
Yeah. So you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't write down your spiritual experiences and try to make money off it. But that's what Chad Daybell did.
That's neither a yes or no question for me.
Okay. And so these conferences that Chad Daybell would go to speak at, would you go to those?
No, I did not.
What were some of those conferences called, do you know?
I know some of them are called Preparing a People.
And he would go and try to sell his books there.
Yes.
And he would go and talk to others about his spiritual experiences.
I believe so.
And you would talk to Chad and your sister about what he was doing.
Sometimes, but it didn't always come up in conversations.
Was your sister going to these conferences with him, or was he going alone?
No, he went alone mostly. Tammy didn't travel with him to those because she was working and raising children.
So she had a job.
So you can hear the tone in her voice of how Tammy was the one doing the working. She was the one taking care of the children while Chad went and lived out his dreams. He wasn't really making a lot of money doing this kind of thing. So why would he want to continue to do it?
And raising children.
So she had a job, taking care of the kids, and Chad was out trying to sell books.
Correct.
And do you know where he would go to try to sell his books?
I didn't track him.
What would Tammy or Chad tell you?
That he just had conferences all over the place. He's been to Idaho, Utah, Arizona. I don't know what other states he went to.
Okay. But those are the three that you remember.
I do remember those.
Right. And did your sister help publish these books?
Yes, she did.
One of my most favorite and memorable moments is when the defense attorney for Lori, just let me play it. You can tell that he was catching on that Chad wasn't making much money in that family. And this is what he said.
Author's books.
Okay. And so did you ever hear Chad and Tammy with you? Excuse me. Did you ever hear Tammy say, Chad, quit trying to sell books, go get a real job?
No, I was never present for any of conversation like that.
And so Tammy, rather than say, go get a real job, she was supportive of his book selling endeavors.
I would think so, yes.
Testimony goes on to show, how Tammy played a huge role in the book publishing company. She was a computer whiz. You know, she had a lot of support, a lot of pull when it came to the success of Chad Daybell. Tammy Daybell was an instrumental part in that book company that Chad was using to gain the attention of women in a very manipulative and selfish way. Neighbors that knew Chad Daybell were shocked on who he was becoming, and they really wouldn't see it until later on, which we'll go over later. Now, something I have learned is Lori did seem to fear death. She did not like that she was getting older. Believing that she is a translated being would give her more relief from aging, from getting old or dying. And it seems that her mental health declined quite significantly as she got older. But even so, Lori Vallow knew right from wrong. She was using her skills, her lies and theories, her mumbo jumbo to control other people tied to her. And was Alex Cox truly believing in this stuff that Lori Vallow was teaching? I really don't believe Alex Cox believed in it, especially after seeing his responses by text whenever Lori would excitingly tell him something that was tied to something to do with something connected to the stories in the Bible, the Mormon Bible, excuse me. And we have to wonder, did Alex Cox have a darker side that Lori was actually opening doors for him to indulge in? According to Melanie Gibb, she says there's a point where she's talking to Alex Cox, and she says she's not certain if she believes in the zombie thing 100%. I'm most likely thinking this will happen later on, but I want to mention it in case we forget. She says that Alex responds with, I 100% believe in it. So, as we approach mid-June, Charles is calling out to one of his good friends, his landlord, his name is Joe, about renting a house for Lori. Charles tells him that he's going to keep the house in Texas and he's just going to come and go. And he'll actually go out and meet with the landlord to go over a punch list. But something you need to know is Charles would talk to people when he was in need of them, that seems, especially Joe here. And then he would disappear, just disappear, drop off the face of the earth, and then reappear again. Charles' landlord, Joe, is actually speaking to a police in an interview and shares some of what he knows that was going on around this time, and what he talked to Charles about and what Charles' concerns were around this time. Again, you can go to East Idaho News and catch the entire interview.
They reunited back in Texas. Yeah, back to Texas. So, and then June was another call from him to say, we're moving back to Phoenix. Do you have anything? And I said, gosh, Charles, I just cleared out the end of May. I just had a tenant move out of that Four Peaks house. Yeah, Four Peaks is open. So they arrived in the middle of June. I think the 20th was when Lori texted me that she had the utilities turned on and she wanted to move stuff in. And I know that I had some cleaning to do. I went over there a few times and met with Lori about a punch list to clean the house up and, fix the sink that, the door handle that, pull this, pull that. And they moved in, she moved in, then Charles would come and go because he was, of course, on these business trips. One time I was at the house and I met with Charles and Lori, do a punch list on what needed to be done. And then Charles would go on his trip again. But then, so you have some history, at least from last year. But then on that Sunday or Monday, before he came back into town, the Thursday before he was shot.
We'll listen in to more of that when we get in July. So, Charles thinks that things are going to get better, but they don't. He can tell things are not going, or he can tell that they're not going to go as well as he would want them to. And meanwhile, he's still talking to people like Adam Cox, Lori's brother, about the fact that he believes that Lori Vallow needs help. He hasn't totally, forgotten about that fact. He still wants to get his wife help. And in the East Idaho News interview, Adam Cox shares what was happening around this time.
We're trying to do an intervention there for Lori. And obviously we saw in court that Lori had suspicions about you and, was talking with Alex. And then, of course, he was shot. So this goes back even to before the kids disappeared. This goes back to before the time he was shot. And you were trying to get her help from everything I've read and everything I understand.
Yeah, me and Charles had called me several times. Like, everybody in our family was cut off from, Lori had everybody cut off from Charles. Charles was trying to go to our family members' houses or whatever, or to call them. I was the only one that took his calls because, in my opinion, family is family, and you need to hear all sides before you can make any decisions on anything. And so when Charles was calling me and he was telling me things, and I was like, that sounds like that could be true. So then I just started listening to him, and he called me every day in a panic. And so we were like, and the things that Lori had told me personally, I told my parents, I was like, we got to get Lori help. There's something really wrong with her. And so with all those kinds of things, when Charles, right before Charles was shot and killed, I was staying at my mom's house. I'd flown in because me and Charles were going to try to get Lori in front of our stake president of their church, of their ward. And so we were just texting back and forth. And
we'll finish this part of the interview when we get in July. So Adam says, we're trying to reach out to mom and dad, Lori's mom and dad, and say, look, we need to get help for Lori. I wish they had listened. Could you imagine living with the regret of ignoring people trying to beg you to help her before it got to this point, before it could destroy her life and others? But no one would listen to Charles. No one would listen to Adam. And there's times that you can hear them regret thinking, maybe there was more I could do. And there really wasn't. I mean, you can't do but so much. Now, forgive me, I've not been able to update the castings, and it's out there. What I'm covering is so massive, I just ran out of time. So this is about the third meeting or casting around this time, and they're doing it, we know that they've been doing it with a Zoom. They've done it at Salima's house and other people's houses. And Lori is getting more. This is Lori showing, in my opinion, her frustration of how she wants to do something to get Charles out of her life. And this is the only thing that she can think of or able to do at the time. Lori will call several of the women that she knows to come quickly. They need to do a fast prayer and casting. And I'm not really certain where to put this right now. Because, Christina has been kicked out of the group. I'm not sure on the exact date. Christina has heard, some of the things that Lori's doing, like crushing the medication and putting it into Charles' drink. And Christina will say, she leaves her house one day and says at some point she thought about, all these things that she's hearing. And that at some point she goes back to Lori and told her that if something was to happen to Charles, that she would go to the police. But what this tells you is Christina can't be the only one catching on to what's going on here. Lori is blatantly saying she's trying to hurt people. And it's not just through castings any longer. And if Christina knows about this, which is not Lori's favorite person, then why not Melanie Boudreaux? And why not, especially Lori's best people, Zalima and Melanie Gibb? In fact, Christina seems quite uncomfortable and confused sitting in the room with all these people who are acting casual, talking about the subject, murdering and killing other people. But let me tell you, though she's disturbed and she's threatening to go to the police, she doesn't necessarily, cut these people off 100% either. So I'm going to share a clip with you guys on this. It's just disturbing. It's unbelievable. And you know what? This must have been very scary for Melanie Gibb once this did break open and wide open, because she knew she was one of the people sitting there hearing this stuff because people witnessed her doing so. She must have had to manipulate a lot of people to keep them from saying more truth about what Melanie Gibb might have known. That's my personal theory, guys, and opinion.
And then the third time was back at Zulema's house, and that's the first time I met Alex.
Okay.
And that's the time that I visited with the police officer about. So she asked all of us to come praying and fasting for her and her family. So we came.
Lori's?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And she wanted to cast out whatever was in her husband kind of idea. That would have been in May. No, it was in June. Because the very last time I saw her was, I think, June 10th.
So June of
2019.
I'm sorry, did you say June 10th?
Yeah.
What, is that when this
The
is?
9th is when we had the meeting.
Okay, so on June 9th you had the meeting.
Yeah, on June 10th I went to her and said, I am really concerned about you. This is not okay.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so Alex, that was the first time I met him, and he was there. And there was another lady named Julie that was there that I'd never met. And as we were eating and visiting, Alex started, I think twice in the evening, he said something to the effect of, he wished he could just kill Charles. Something to that effect. And then Lori that night made a comment about having crushed up some Valium into, I think it was Valium, whatever JJ medicine was to keep him calm. That she had crushed up some pills and put it in Charles's protein powder, shake stuff. And so totally disturbed by that. So the next day, after I finished up with my stuff, it was dark, so it was the evening time. I went over and just said to her, Lori, if something were to happen to Charles, I would go to the police. You can't.
So let me stop you right there. During this meeting, during this meal, Alex is there.
Yeah.
And Alex tells you that he wishes he could kill Charles.
Yeah.
Did he say how he might do that?
No.
What did Lori say?
I mean, we're fasting for this family, and to hear somebody be so casually and caustically.
Right.
So I was totally disturbed by that. And then to have Lori say that she had crushed up some pills and put it in Charles's stuff.
Did she say when she did that?
In Texas.
When they were living in Texas?
Yeah. Before she'd come. And that she made the comment that she'd crushed up 10 or something. So anyway, the next day, as soon as I could, I went over and visited her. And just said, Lori, if something were to happen to Charles, I would go to the police, because the way that you guys are talking, she's like, Christina, I'm overly dramatic. I'm just dramatic. And I did crush up some, but it was 2. That was the most that you could put in there, kind of thing. And I said, well, it's totally not cool. Can't do that. Anyway, and from that point on, Lori was done with me. I reached out a couple times to her to try to check on her, see what was going on, and I was not responded to. I think maybe once after that.
So the investigator asked her, is Chad there? No, Chad is not there. So Lori and Alex, they already have a history of wanting to kill Joe Ryan. So this is nothing new to anybody that knows Lori and Alex. And the media, not knowing this, when this breaks, will try to say, oh, Lori was so innocent. She would never do anything like this. It must have had everything to do with Chad Daybell. That can't be further from the truth. So now you kind of start to get the truth of, why Lori wants to completely cut Christina Atwood out of this group. She knows too much. She threatened to call the police. And there's no doubt in my mind at that point, when Lori goes quiet, that's when you need to be worried the most. So this group of girls had done several castings in person at this point. So in February, they had their first one. The second personal meeting of this casting was at Alex's, but Alex wasn't there, she says. But in June 9th, at this casting, they all fasted to pray for her family. And Christina, you can tell she's not real happy. Alex is there for that one. But Christina changes her demeanor from being actually disgusted by Lori to more trying to help Lori fix the problem.
Obviously, you believe that she was truthful when she said she put something in Charles's drink.
Right. Well, and I wanted to know, like, did you really put a bunch in? Because if you are, we're gonna take care of this right now. Like, it's gotta be thrown away, and you've got to fix it, right? And she just kind of laughed it off and said, "Oh, I'm just dramatic. I didn't put a bunch in. It was just,
But you told her if something happened, you'd call the police.
I did.
And then this is the last time you talked to her?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I really can't figure out what Christina's intentions are here. I'm hoping they're good because I don't know her. She was with this group of people, but it seems like she's maybe trying to get Lori to throw away the protein thing to save Charles. Or is it to help Lori? Share your thoughts below. What do you think Christina Atwood, what is her intentions when she talks to Lori? Now, I'm reading this, something that I put into the timeline here, July 9th, 2019. Chad searches, or it says the user search, when you surprise someone with accusations. Lori goes on pretending that life is all normal. She even sends Colby some money through Venmo with a note that said medicine. All right, so we'll go ahead and stop here. I want to say to you guys, if you really enjoy the work that I put into this series, you can give. I think I have like a membership, or I have these little perks that you can give to there, or just say thanks. Or you can buy some merch that I really need to redo. I just haven't had time. And you can just subscribe, like, comment, and share. I really do appreciate those that do help, who give on Patreon, who have shared, who have given throughout the last 3 years. I love you guys, and I'll see you guys soon.